Acting Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's great to address the chamber on this very, very important bill. And I'd just like to address Senator Canavan's concerns about the environment as a result of these renewables, because that is what really concerns me about the path that we are taking. Is if we continue down the path of constantly getting rid of our baseload energy in this country, like coal, and replace it with wind and solar and lithium batteries and transmission lines, we are going to create an environmental catastrophe. Now, I touched on this last night. However, it is well known that wind farms kill millions and millions of birds and bats. They kill apex birds. They kill lots and lots of bats. Bats, many people probably don't know, are one of the major pollinators along with bees in our environment. They also, and then we've got the issue, of course, with batteries. Batteries come from rare earths like lithium, for example. Lithium's a 1% ore body. You have to mine 100 tonnes of ore to get 1 tonne of metal. That involves an intensive electrolysis process that in itself requires lots and lots of energy. However, these rare earth mines, it's just not that simple to go in and get the ore. You have to go and mine around and around and around. So quite often, you're going to have something like a stripping ratio of 10 to 1. So you might have to move 1,000 tonnes of dirt just to end up with 1 tonne of metal. Now, that metal, after it's been extracted through an extremely energy-intensive process, then will get shipped over to China where it's put into a car battery, and then that car battery is then shipped to the States where it's put into a Tesla, and then the Tesla comes back to Australia where you basically have to charge the battery by sticking it into the wall and using coal-fired power station. So that using coal energy powered from coal. Now, the other thing, of course, we've also got solar panels. I just put an article up on my Facebook page this morning about the environmental catastrophe that we've got going on over in California at the moment, and we'll have the same catastrophe here, whereby we've got dangerous substances leaking from these solar panels once they are taken to the trash. And this is concerning because, as the head of the CSIRO said in estimates to me, it costs 3 times the amount to recycle a lithium battery as it does to actually produce a battery. Now, so the question is, and this is a big concern, is how are we going to afford, and what is the Labor Party going to do about recycling all of these rare earth batteries? So. And then the other thing we need to touch on, of course, is the transmission lines. We are going to have hundreds and hundreds of kilometres of transmission lines. Now, the Labor Party have already earmarked a $20 billion Rewiring Australia fund. It's not Rewiring Australia fund. It's additional transmission lines that are going to have to connect all these little tiny solar and wind farms because these solar and wind farms don't produce anywhere near the same amount of energy as what a coal-powered fire station does. If you go back to the 90s when 70 or 80% of the East Coast was powered by coal-powered fire, you only had about 30 power stations and you only needed a limited number of transmission lines to get the power to the actual home. However, what I really want to talk about today is address the issue that yesterday when Senator Wong couldn't actually define what net zero was, and I spoke to her about it this morning, and she goes, well, Senator Rennick, why do you think so many scientists have all got it wrong? Well, I don't actually follow scientists. I actually follow the mathematics behind the science, and in particular the actual algorithms that underpin good science. Now, last night, and I'll do this again because I can see Senator Chisholm sitting over there with a silly grin on his face. The first scientist I referred to was none other than...
Senator Rennick, please direct your comments through the chair.
Okay, thank you very much. The first paper I raised was none other than Albert Einstein's 1917 quantum theory on radiation. Now, he himself says that radiation is so insignificant it drops out. And this is the thing about the whole science argument about how we're living in a greenhouse effect, etc., etc. At the end of the day, the two strongest forces of heat transfer in the environment is actually convection and conduction. Now, climate change theory wants you to believe that the atmosphere is a closed environment. Okay? The way a greenhouse works is that it traps convection. It traps convection. So during the day, as the sun heats up the greenhouse, the air rises.
Order, Senator Rennick. Minister, on a point of order.
Yes, it is a point of order. The tradition in our chamber is to have a wide-ranging debate. There is a motion, however, before the chair from Senator Waters, an amendment before the chair, and I do wonder if Senator Rennick is being relevant. He may be, but I wonder if you might remind him of the question before the chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. Senator Rennick, I will remind you that the question before the chair is that the amendments moved by Senator Waters be agreed to, and I would direct you to be relevant to those amendments, and if you have questions for the minister, to get to them in a timely fashion. Thank you.
I am being relevant because at the end of the day, whether it's a 43% reduction in CO2 in the atmosphere or a 75% reduction of CO2 in the atmosphere, it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, it's convection that drives heat transfer in the atmosphere, not radiation. Don't believe me? Take Albert Einstein's words for it, right? Because at the end of the day, carbon dioxide only absorbs and emits photons at 2 frequencies. One's at 2.8 microns, which according to Planck's law has 5 times more energy, and that's incoming solar radiation, and the other one is outgoing long-wave radiation at 14.8 microns. So the whole point of this discussion is to actually debunk the whole junk science behind climate change. And I did this last night, but I'll just run you through the 5 different laws that prove that disproves climate change. Number 1, first law of thermodynamics, conduction. Basically, all carbon dioxide does is absorb and emit photons that come via the sun. Now, that law actually is Einstein's special theory of relativity, E equals mc squared, and as I said last night, he came up with that theory in 1905. Interestingly enough, he didn't get a Nobel Prize for that. He actually got a Nobel Prize for the photoelectric effect, which is one of 4 papers he wrote in 1905. And the photoelectric effect impacts the fact that that's where it comes into every molecule has a specific vibrational frequency, and it's at that frequency it can only absorb heat. Now, the other law that I also used last night was Wien's law, and that actually describes the frequency at which the CO2 molecule will actually emit heat. And as I pointed out last night, that law says that carbon dioxide only emits heat at 192 degrees Kelvin, which just happens to be negative 80 degrees Celsius. So the only place where carbon dioxide is going to actually be releasing heat is either at the bottom of Antarctica or about 10 kilometres up in the troposphere. Now, this matters, of course, because this actually disproves, the fact that this science is bogus. But I'll continue. What I have here is actually an energy budget from the Australian Academy of Science. Now, they want you to believe that downwelling radiation averages out on a 24-hour period over 342 watts per square metre. Now, funnily enough, the CSIRO says that the downwelling radiation from CO2 is 333 watts per square metre. That's a difference of 9 watts per square metre. What does that tell you? That these guys can't even measure downwelling radiation. They can't even measure it. We're told the science is settled, but they can't even measure it. But guess what? The IPCC says that the increase in downwelling radiation since 1750 from the increase of CO2 in the atmosphere is only 2 watts per square metre. So get this, their error in measurements has got a margin of error of 400%, right? 400%. So you can't even measure what it is you're supposed to be spending billions of dollars on properly. How's that going to work? Not too good. But here's the other crazy thing. They want you to believe that the downwelling radiation from carbon dioxide is actually stronger than the incoming solar radiation from the sun. Now, that's actually absurd, because as we know from Planck's law, from 1902, I think it was, that effectively the solar radiation has a higher frequency of about up to 100 times in the ultraviolet range and the visible light range. Visible light range is about 30 times stronger than 14.8 microns in the infrared range. They want you to believe that infrared has more energy than actually ultraviolet and visible light. I mean, this stuff is pathetic. But here's the real doozy. Here's the real doozy. What's missing in all of this energy budget, people? I'll tell you what it is. A bloke, I'll give you a bit of a clue here. A bloke by the name of Isaac Newton hypothesised this back in about the 16th, 17th century, and that, of course, is gravity. These guys want you to think that photons aren't influenced by the gravity of the Earth, which just happens to be 5.6 trillion billion tonnes. They seem to think that that's not going to have a pull on a photon. So the whole thing's totally debunked. So my question to the minister is why is there actually 40 different models to calculate net zero as per, okay, if the science is settled? Because that came from the head of the CSIRO, who said there were 40 different models used to calculate net zero. The science is not settled if the head of the CSIRO in this country says that there's actually 40 different models, and which model are we going to use here in Australia, and how do we know that model isn't going to be, there isn't going to be arbitrage between the different models, between different countries who exploit that the confusion in climate change to milk Australia dry?
Thank you, Senator Rennick.
Authorised G. Rennick, LNP Chermside.